The distance between a star and someone nobody will return calls for can close faster than anyone anticipates, and in Hollywood, it closes faster than anywhere else. The careers covered here each reached a point at which the professional consensus was that they were finished, not declining, not struggling, but finished. What happened next is the record. John Travolta. In 1977 and 1978, John Travolta made Saturday Night Fever and Grease back-to-back. He received an Academy Award nomination for the first, and the second became the highest-grossing live-action movie musical ever made. He was 23 years old and was described, without exaggeration, as one of the most popular entertainers in the world. The decade that followed produced Urban Cowboy, which did reasonably well, and then a series of films, Moment by Moment, Two of a Kind, Perfect, the Staying Alive sequel he should have avoided. That did not. By the late 1980s, he was appearing in Look Who's Talking, a talking baby comedy, which was actually a hit, but the category of hit it was did not restore the position he had held. He was working, he was not relevant. In the early 1990s, Quentin Tarantino was developing his second feature. His first choice for the role of Vincent Vega, the philosophical hitman at the center of Pulp Fiction, was Michael Madsen, who turned it down. Tarantino met Travolta for lunch and found, beneath the dim bulb image that a decade of bad choices had accumulated around him, something useful, a quality of thoughtful deliberateness, a man who seemed to be genuinely considering the world rather than simply reacting to it. He offered Travolta the role. The film opened at Cannes in 1994 and won the Palme d'Or. It earned more than $200 million worldwide. Travolta's portrayal of Vincent Vega, the dance scene with Uma Thurman, the philosophical conversations with Samuel L. Jackson, the specific cool that the film required, and he delivered without apparent effort, earned him his second Academy Award nomination and did something more significant than that. It reminded an industry that had categorized him as a former star that categorization is not fact. He was on the A-list again the following Monday morning. Subscribe to support more quality videos. Your subscription enables me to produce additional compelling content. Please join today. Robert Downey Jr. Robert Downey Jr.'s father, the underground filmmaker Robert Downey Sr., gave him his first acting role at the age of 5 and introduced him to marijuana at the age of 8, offering it as a kind of bonding experience between them. What followed from this beginning was several decades of functioning through addiction, the kind of functioning that looks, from the outside, like a career, and then a period in the 1990s when the functioning stopped. He had given serious performances. Less Than Zero in 1987, in which he played a wealthy young man destroyed by drugs, and which he later described as the ghost of Christmas future for what his own life would become. Chaplin in 1992, which earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor and a BAFTA win and a period of genuine critical respect. Then the arrests began. In June 1996, he was stopped speeding down Sunset Boulevard and found in possession of heroin, cocaine, crack cocaine, and an unloaded handgun. A month later, still on parole, he wandered into a neighbor's house and fell asleep in a child's bed. He described his addiction around this period as being like having a shotgun in his mouth with his finger on the trigger, and he liked the taste of gunmetal. In 1999, following repeated violations of parole and multiple failed drug tests, he was sentenced to 3 years in California State Prison. He served 1 year. After his release, he was arrested twice more within 8 months. In 2001, he was fired from the television series Ally McBeal, where he had been performing well and winning awards, following an arrest in Palm Springs. Insurance companies would not cover him. Directors who admired his talent could not justify the liability. His first wife had left him. He had lost his house. Mel Gibson, who was his friend, paid the liability insurance bond personally to allow him to work in 2003. From 2003 forward, he put himself in front of every camera that would have him and stayed sober. Jon Favreau had to fight the studio to cast him as Tony Stark in Iron Man in 2008. the studio was uncertain. Favreau persisted. Iron Man became one of the highest-grossing films in Marvel's history and launched a franchise that made Downey one of the highest-paid actors in the world for more than a decade. In 2024, he won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for Oppenheimer. Drew Barrymore. Drew Barrymore was 7 years old when she played Gertie in E.T. the Extraterrestrial in 1982 and became, essentially overnight, one of the most recognized child performers in the world. She was drinking alcohol by 9. Her mother had been taking her to Studio 54 and to adult parties since she was a small child, and the environment at those parties included cocaine, which she was using by 12. By that same age, Hollywood producers had begun to decline her for roles, having received enough information about her behavior to classify her as unreliable. She entered rehabilitation at 13 and spent 18 months in a psychiatric facility in Van Nuys. At 14, she attempted suicide. At 14, she also legally emancipated herself from her parents and began, in the specific way that a 14-year-old alone in the world begins, to manage her own life. She published a memoir about this period at the age of 14, which was called Little Girl Lost, and was more candid than most adults would have been capable of. She rebuilt her career through the early 1990s in roles that were deliberately different from the child she had been: Poison Ivy, Boys on the Side. And then through Scream in 1996, and the subsequent run of comedies, Charlie's Angels, and Never Been Kissed, and 50 First Dates, that established her as a legitimate adult star and a producer with genuine commercial instincts. She founded Flower Films in 1995 and has produced most of her own work since. She has hosted a daytime talk show since 2020. The girl who had been blacklisted by Hollywood at 12 is now, decades later, among the most durable presences in the American entertainment industry. Nick Nolte. On September 11, 2002, California police received 6 separate 911 calls from witnesses reporting a sedan weaving across the Pacific Coast Highway. When officers stopped the vehicle, they found Nick Nolte at the wheel, chemically impaired, in a Hawaiian shirt. The photograph taken at his booking became one of the most widely circulated celebrity images of the decade. Nolte, with hair that appeared to have been arranged by static electricity, eyes unfocused, wearing the expression of a man who had made several consecutive decisions that were not in his interest. The image was so thoroughly distributed that it became a specific cultural reference point for the concept of a bad mugshot, and it remained that reference point for years. He had been, before the decade leading up to the arrest, a legitimate major star. 48 Hours in 1982 created the buddy cop genre as it would be practiced for the next 20 years. Down and Out in Beverly Hills was a substantial hit. His work in The Prince of Tides earned him an Academy Award nomination. His work in Affliction in 1997 earned him a second. He had also been, for much of this period, managing an alcohol and drug problem that was not being managed as well as he believed it was. In his 2018 memoir, Rebel, he described taking GHB before a gym workout on the day of the arrest and knowing, even as he made the decision, that he was repeating an addictive cycle he had been in before. The 2002 mugshot was the public end of a private accumulation. He continued working after the arrest, continued working seriously, and the work eventually accumulated back into something. Warrior in 2011, A Walk in the Woods in 2015, Peaceful Warrior before that. The arrest did not end his career. It ended a particular version of how his career was going. Mickey Rourke. In the 1980s, Mickey Rourke was one of the most compelling actors working in American film. Dangerous in Rumblefish, charismatic in Diner, physically overwhelming in 9.5 Weeks, genuinely strange, and genuinely brilliant in Barfly. Elia Kazan, who ran the actor studio for decades and had seen everything, reportedly said that Rourke's audition was the best he had witnessed in 30 years. Then, in 1991, Rourke left acting to pursue professional boxing. He had trained as a boxer since his teens in Miami and felt the sport was unfinished business. He fought 8 professional bouts. He won most of them. He also sustained facial injuries severe enough to require reconstructive surgery, and the surgery altered his appearance in ways that were permanent and visible. And the visible alteration meant that he returned to acting as a man who no longer looked like the actor people remembered. Hollywood, which has always valued physical consistency in its male leads, found him difficult to place. He worked through the late 1990s and early 2000s in smaller roles, in supporting parts, in films that did not attract the attention his work had once commanded. Then Darren Aronofsky developed The Wrestler. His original choice for the lead, an aging, physically wrecked professional wrestler named Randy the Ram, living alone in a trailer park and still working the circuit because there is literally nothing else left for him, was Nicolas Cage. Cage withdrew. Aronofsky looked at Rourke and saw something he could not have written deliberately, a man whose real life contained the exact psychic structure the character required. Rourke accepted a salary of $100,000, a fraction of what he had once commanded, and spent months training with professional wrestlers and adding nearly 30 pounds of muscle. The film opened at Venice in 2008 and won the Golden Lion. Rourke won the Golden Globe, the BAFTA, and the Independent Spirit Award, and received an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor. At his Golden Globe acceptance speech, he acknowledged his years of isolation and thanked, specifically, his dogs, who had stayed with him through everything. The room understood what he meant. Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper co-wrote, directed, and starred in Easy Rider in 1969 and made enough money and generated enough cultural noise to be given complete creative control over his next film. He took the money and the crew to Peru and spent most of 1970 accumulating 40 hours of footage, while everyone involved was, by multiple accounts, not entirely present. The resulting film, The Last Movie, won a prize at Venice and destroyed his career. The Hollywood establishment concluded that he was ungovernable, and they had enough evidence to support the conclusion. He spent much of the 1970s as an exile from the industry that had briefly worshipped him, living in Taos, New Mexico, known primarily as one of Hollywood's most notorious drug addicts. A description Rolling Stone magazine applied to him with the routine confidence of a fact that did not require verification. He got sober in 1983 following an intervention that included, at various points, a straitjacket. The comeback was immediate and specific. 2 films in 1986 that between them constituted the most complete reintroduction any actor has managed in the industry's history. In Hoosiers, he played an alcoholic assistant basketball coach in a small Indiana town, and the performance was so precise and so economical in its depiction of a man trying to hold himself together with inadequate materials that it earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. In Blue Velvet, released the same year, David Lynch cast him as Frank Booth, a gas-inhaling sexual sadist of such complete, committed menace that the character became one of the definitive villains in American cinema. Hopper had told Lynch on reading the script, "You have to let me play Frank Booth, because I am Frank Booth." Lynch let him. The nomination and the performance arrived in the same year, from the same man, and the industry spent approximately 2 weeks deciding he had never actually been gone. Cher. By the end of the 1970s, Cher was a single mother with a stalled music career, a failed second marriage to Greg Allman, and a television show that had not worked. She had been famous since 1965 as the taller female half of Sonny and Cher, and she had maintained a version of that fame through the decade, but the specific quality of the fame had become something neither the industry nor the public quite knew what to do with. She was too comic for drama and too visible for reinvention and too associated with a specific era that was ending. She trained as an actress at the Actors Studio in New York, which she later cited as transformative, and began appearing on Broadway in the early 1980s. Robert Altman cast her in Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean, and his willingness to take her seriously as a dramatic performer persuaded others to follow. Mike Nichols cast her in Silkwood in 1983 alongside Meryl Streep and Kurt Russell, and her performance earned her a nomination for Best Supporting Actress. The nomination was the formal signal that the reclassification was complete. By 1987, she had 3 major films in theaters simultaneously, The Witches of Eastwick, Suspect, and Moonstruck, and at the Academy Awards ceremony in April 1988, she walked to the stage to collect the Best Actress Oscar for Moonstruck, wearing a Bob Mackie outfit that would have been appropriate for no other occasion. Accepting the award, she said she wanted to say something. When she was little, she said, her mother had told her she wanted her to be something, and she supposed this represented 23 or 24 years of work. She had never won anything from her peers before. Kim Basinger. In 1989, at the peak of her commercial power, Kim Basinger spent $20 million on approximately 1,700 acres of Braselton, Georgia. Her intention was to transform the town into a tourist destination with film studios and a film festival. The plan did not come together. By 1995, she had sold most of the land for somewhere around $4 million, a loss of $15 million or more, depending on the accounting. This was not, however, the catastrophe that ended the first phase of her career. That was Boxing Helena. Basinger had verbally agreed to star in the film, a thriller about a surgeon who amputates a woman's limbs to keep her captive. And then, after sharing the script with a range of colleagues and receiving an overwhelmingly negative response, she backed out shortly before production was to begin. Mainline Pictures sued her for breach of contract. In 1993, a Los Angeles jury found against her and awarded the production company approximately $8 to $9 million, depending on the source. She could not pay. She filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The judgment was eventually overturned on appeal, and she and the studio settled for $3.8 million. But the damage to her professional reputation, the image of an actress who committed to projects and then walked away from them, had already been absorbed by an industry that maintains long memories on such matters. She turned down L.A. Confidential twice, feeling insecure about returning to the screen and content in her role as a mother. Director Curtis Hanson, who had cast the film carefully and believed she was the only actress for the role of Lynn Bracken, a high-class escort with a complicated arrangement with 2 detectives in 1950s Los Angeles, kept calling. She eventually said yes. The film was released in 1997 and became one of the most praised films of the decade. She won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, the Golden Globe, and the SAG Award. It was one of the best performances of the year in a film that has only grown in reputation since. Tatum O'Neal. Tatum O'Neal was 10 years old when she accepted the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for Paper Moon in 1974, wearing a tuxedo and a tomboy haircut and delivering the shortest acceptance speech in the ceremony's history. All I really want to thank is my director, Peter Bogdanovich, and my father. She remains the youngest competitive Oscar winner in the Academy's history. The record has stood for more than 50 years and shows no sign of being broken. What the tuxedo and the short speech and the record did not show was the life she was living. Her mother, actress Joanna Moore, had lost custody of Tatum and her brother Griffin due to severe addiction problems. Tatum was 6 years old when she and her brother went to live with their father, Ryan O'Neal. Life with Ryan O'Neal involved its own categories of chaos, including, by her later account, physical and emotional abuse, exposure to adult behavior of various kinds, and a father whose relationship with his own fame and its consequences was not well managed. The Oscar, rather than anchoring her career, became something she could never quite fit back inside. She continued working. The Bad News Bears in 1976, International Velvet in 1978. But the industry's relationship with child stars who grow up is always complicated, and hers was more complicated than most. She married tennis player John McEnroe in 1986, had 3 children, and divorced in 1994. After the divorce, the drug problems that had been managed for years became unmanageable. She developed an addiction to heroin. McEnroe obtained custody of the children in 1998. She was arrested in 2008, buying cocaine outside her apartment. She was tried and, instead of prison, received a probationary sentence and mandatory treatment. She has spoken publicly and at considerable length about the arc of her life since Paper Moon, and in 2004 published a memoir, A Paper Life, that was specific enough about what had happened to her that her father publicly denied it as malicious lies. In 2011, she published a second memoir, which described her continuing effort to reconstruct her relationship with him. She eventually did.